Good morning, everybody, and a warm welcome to this webinar. Just going to get the technology straight here, where we celebrate the International Women's Day by listening to three inspiring alumni that's located all around the world. And a warm welcome, as I said, and my name is Maria Johansson. I work as an alumni relations manager here at Lund University. And today we're going to listen to inspiring stories from all around the world. Before I hand over the screen to our speakers, I will just give you some brief information about the Alumni Network here at Lund University. I know that we have quite a few students in the audience. And this is a perfect network to join if you're at the end of your studies and want to stay in touch with the Lund University, your alma mater, when you go out in other adventures in life. It's a free lifetime membership, and with this you will get access to all our alumni events. You get invitation to that, and you will also get a membership card with benefits and discounts for alumni. And of course, it's a perfect way to stay in touch with Lund University all through your life. I will send the link to our more information and the registration website in the chat. So feel free to check that out and join the network as soon as possible. You can do that even if you're not graduated yet, of course. And it's open to all students, staff, and researchers. You don't have to have a degree from Lund University as long as you have studied here for a semester. If you're an exchange student, for example, you're very welcome to join as well. Just to let you know, we're in the studio here at External Relations on this sunny but snowy day in Lund. I have a big screen TV just next to me, so if I gaze off during the webinar, it's not to be rude, it's just to have a look at my speakers as well, but the camera is straight ahead. Some just quick housekeeping rules for the webinar. There is a Q&A function. If you find that probably at the bottom of your Zoom page, and that's where you're welcome to post any questions you have. I will moderate them during our session today. You can't use the chat for questions. I won't be able to see that, but please use the Q&A and feel free to post questions during the full presentation, and we will take all questions at the end. This webinar is recorded, so it will be available online on YouTube for a couple of weeks afterwards, and you will receive the link to the webinar in an email from us. But with that was my quick information. I just would like to say hello to our set of hard to speak and do things at the same time. Here are our speakers today. A warm welcome to Divya, Linda, and Alla. Thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your story. I hope you're all doing good wherever you are. Divya, you're in California at the moment. Linda, you're in Tasmania, and Alla, you're in Niger. Yeah, great. So our first speaker today is Divya. I know that you had a long day traveling to California, so we're going to let you start to speak. And you told me that you're originally from India and you're now living in Lund, but currently in California for a few days anyway. Sorry to have to keep you up so late at night. Or maybe that's the best time as an entrepreneur, maybe that's the best time to work. I don't know. You studied the master's degree program in food innovation and product design. And that's also when the idea of Ooble came about, I've been told. So thank you so much for sharing your story. And I should say that, Divya, the screen is yours.
Thank you so much, Maria. So good morning, everybody, and greetings from California. So I landed here about an hour ago after 2 canceled flights and crazy commotion. But after Maria and her team put in this amazing event, I could not miss it. So here I am. I am Divya Mohan. I am an alumni of Lund University. I did a food innovation and product design master's, and I'm here to share my journey of what it was that Lund University and being an alum in Lund University is like for me. So I'm from a city called Bangalore in India that has pretty much the same population as all of Sweden. So you must understand, when I landed in the city, I remember very distinctly getting picked up by friends. And I came to Lund Central Station. And as I walked out of the station towards the cathedral, I was asking my friends, this is such a cute suburb. Where is the center? How far is it from here? And they were giggling with laughter, and I realized I am at the center. So I went from a massive city to coming to Lund, and I remember thinking to myself, I would never be able to survive here. But 6 years later, I call it home. So this journey from not being thinking that this is not going to be someplace I can ever live to calling it home is where a lot of things along with Lund University has helped me establish that. So at the university, something that was quite exciting for me was some courses that were very practically driven. But one of the courses that stood out for me, which is the origination story of Ooble, was an innovation course wherein we were asked to find a sustainability gap in the food packaging industry. And there are a lot. But during that time in 2016, when I was doing the course, the Rio de Janeiro Olympics was happening. And during the Olympics, there were also a lot of beach cleanups. I remember a news flash that came up when we were looking at the news in the evening that straws were the seventh biggest pollutant of the oceans during that beach cleanup. And that kind of made us wonder a little bit, how is that possible? How is something so small creating this sort of an impact in terms of numbers? So we dug a little bit deeper. And as we were doing that with this course and the question in mind, we slowly started realizing that not just that straws are a ubiquitous problem, but more than 1 billion straws, plastic straws, were used every single day globally. And that's when we realized we have a problem that might need a solution. So once we set that up in the course, what we learned was design thinking. And in design thinking, you go on about really understanding a problem and then start looking at different aspects of the solution. So you don't jump into a solution, but first step, understand the problem. And that is what we did when we did human-centered design thinking that we learned in the course, which is, of course, you start with what is, where you fully understand what the problem is currently. And this is where we dug into, why do people use straws? Where do they use straws? When do they use straws? And it changed my mindset of how to think about it, because usually you're going directly to, okay, this is a problem, how do you solve it? But now we spend so much time in really understanding the problem through this process. And we'd go into McDonald's, we'd go into Espresso House and just see how people are using a straw. When do they pick up a straw? Why do they use a straw? So this process really gave us not just an understanding of the psyche behind using a straw, but the convenience and the hygiene aspect that people sort of connect to the product. And it opened our mind into what solution finding can be. So we didn't jump to how do we solve the problem till we understood the problem completely. And that's when that mindset that was, I guess, given to us during the course helped with. So as we went through this process of what is, understanding the problem, the next thing in the design thinking process that we learned was to go into another very exciting phase of problem solving, which is what if. And this is where we let our thoughts explode. No idea was a bad idea. We were taught a lot of innovation tools. And really went on to thinking, okay, what if, which is what if you could do something differently, what kind of solutions would you come up with? And this is where you learn it, or I learned a very important aspect of creativity, which is you're not born creative. You learn how to be creative. And that learning is what is important for all of us. Every single person can be creative. Every single person can be innovative. And that learning comes through training yourself with these innovation tools. I think I muted myself for a second, but I'm back again. So after we went through what if, What we had to then go through is really understand what wows, or find in those solutions that we were looking at. We had to find solutions that, one, consumers like all of you find desirable, are excited about, it should wow the consumer, and find also something that is viable. Now, through this process, of course, we had a lot of different ideas that were generated, and we're trying to solve a very important problem, which is plastic straws, of course, are an issue. There are alternatives that are currently in the market, but they just don't work as functionally as a plastic straw. For example, a paper straw which gets too soggy too quickly, or a metal straw, or a glass straw, or a bamboo straw that needs to be reused, which is not really hygienic for us. So during this process of what if, what wows, in the course, the question that then went on for many years to really keep in my mind was, what if you could eat your straw? And it was a very exciting question. But after the course, the one thing that we went into was the next phase of it, because this question did not leave my head and it kind of stayed with me for a long time. And we went into the most important, well, one of the most important steps, which is the fourth question: what works? And found, how do you make a solution like this feasible? And this is where I think having the university set up, where you have a lot of support through the system, comes in, because even beyond the course, I then had that connection and network to bounce off my ideas with the professors and wonder, okay, how is the solution going to be feasible? I realized, as I was making prototypes in my kitchen in the university labs, that making something that is edible, that you can actually eat and does not break your teeth, that is sturdy in liquid, so it can actually stay as a, let's say, straw-like product in a liquid, and that is affordable, because if people don't buy it, you don't really have a problem, you don't really have a product, is not easy. All my prototypes failed miserably. Of course, I was learning with every single prototype, but until my, I think, 300th prototype, it didn't even look like a straw. And that process of not being dejected by the failing prototype, but being excited about how to do something better, is another mindset that was extremely important, and something that gets integrated during the design thinking process. And so through this, reiterative process of prototyping, all the professors and my student and the students I was studying with back in Lund University were my test subjects. I would have all these prototypes at the university at different halls, and then they would try it and give me feedback. And that was my first consumer test for the development of answering one important question: what if you can eat your straw? So over this journey and building the product, we were also encouraged by LU Innovation, which is part of Lund University, about becoming a part of the incubation center over there called Venture Lab. This is where I think first time the idea of, can we make something that was just idea into a business came about. It was never part of the plan. It was supposed to be just an idea you play around with. But through the process of going to Venture Lab, and through Venture Lab going through competitions like Dragons at the University, by winning that, we were able to fund the idea even more, but also registering for the likes of Climate Kick through LU Innovation, by which we were learning how businesses are designed, how exactly do you build a business model. What was just, or what we thought was just something we were doing out of sheer fun, was slowly getting structured into a product, and a product into a startup. And this was through the network that we were getting, and the network that was getting built around us in that atmosphere that we had at Lund University. So like I said, I would bounce a lot of the ideas with professors in there. And at Chemi Centrum, we have fantastic food professors. And I got the idea that to truly have a commercialized product, you need automation. So far, for about a year and a half, I was making these prototypes and products by hand, and going to Malmo Food Festival and having people try the product. So now we had to go try automation. So I remember we applied for an innovation grant through alumnae, again, a network that is quite easily accessible when you're part of LU Innovation. And that's when we bought our first equipment. Now, during this process, there was so much I did not know. I'm sure I still don't know a lot of the things. And it's very nerve-wracking when you go into, let's say, investor meetings or meetings in general, wherein you have to Google words because you don't understand a lot of things. I remember I had to look at what is bookkeeping, what is a purchase order, how do you design a purchase order, how do you talk to a supplier. All of these things are, of course, a step-by-step learning as you start building it. But what I realized in that process of not knowing a lot of things, there are also a lot of people and organizations within the network, like Niforgathorp Centrum, I'm sure I'm not pronouncing it right, but which helps you get that and answer those questions. So today, I'm really excited to present to you Ooble. I hope you can see this. So what we do is we produce, manufacture, and develop straws that you can eat. They are 100% plant-based, edible, and they come in different flavors. So you can sip into your beverage and then use an Ooble straw. I'm going to show you what a straw looks like. So we have them in different sizes. Yeah, you sip into your beverage and then you can bite into your Ooble straw. And you get like a hint of the flavor depending on the flavor that you select. And as we were developing this, the most important aspect for us is it's tasty in on your palate and kind to the planet. They are sturdy in liquids for about 40 minutes. And you can, of course, find these products at weareooble.com. Now, what was really exciting for me that I also was able to do with all the support I got is we built out a manufacturing facility in India that is completely run and operated by women. And I know we're celebrating a very important day today, and that really comes to say that the support that we get from the people around us helps us get empowered and empower other women and people that when we have the opportunity. So the help we get is the help we end up giving. And that's a cycle we have to continue. We were having a discussion just before I came into here, and I was sort of alluding to the fact that when I started my journey in university, I chose to do biotechnology engineering. And I was asked, wait, why are you doing biotechnology? What are you going to become with that? I then went on to specialize in food technology. And then I got questions about, are you planning to become a cook? So what I'm trying to tell you is I'm very glad I did not listen to them, but rather chose and paved my own path. There's always going to be, then I'll try it later on, or there's always going to be a reason that you don't have a good enough idea, you don't have a good enough team, you don't have a good enough support system. But if you start stepping in that direction and forget about all of this, one of the good things about being part of Lund University is you have all this network and support right around you. So ask the people around, and I've always found it extremely helpful. So thank you for this opportunity, for sharing my journey, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. And the most important thing is don't forget to eat your straw.
Thank you so much, Divya, for that presentation. I'm sure I haven't tried your straws yet, but I'm certainly gonna give it a go for sure. One question is because you've been working with Ooble for a couple of years. What's your 5-year plan? Where do you see yourself and Ooble in 5 years?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And we and the team always look at, okay, so what do we want to do? When we built Ooble and the straw, we did not really have an idea of this becoming a startup. But now that we've established it into a startup and are understanding how the market works, what's important, one of the most important things for us is having sustainability very ingrained in all aspects of our business. It's not simple. Right from packaging to how exactly we sell it, the logistics, all of it adds a lot of carbon footprint into our system. So part of it, one is solving that supply chain for our own product, which we want to get much better at. We have a 3-year plan for how exactly we're going to improve our supply chain to make it more logistic and consumer friendly from a price perspective. And another important aspect is really diverge into products by finding more problems that we're trying to solve. So not really just come up with products to have line extensions, but truly find problems that exist where we can fill a gap in the market. So go back to design thinking and not just make a product because, let's make an edible plate, but sure, how does that solve a problem? People are not going to eat, So it's not just coming up with more products just because we can, but how do we solve problems? And we are in that process of understanding what to solve next.
And what does the competition look like? Are there many eatable straws out on the market?
Funny enough, when we started was when we had a lot of our competitors in the edible straw space or edible packaging space startups. So it was during 2017 that all these companies sort of came up as well. There are edible straws and edible packaging companies that are in the market. Of course, it is a niche still in terms of the product, and we all have to differentiate differently. And I'm really excited to see a lot more edible packaging companies come up. Of course, hopefully it's not greenwashed, into, yes, we have an edible packaging, only the end product is sustainable, but everything else is unsustainable. That is the biggest problem that can occur, unintended consequences of making sustainable products. But otherwise, I think competition means that the area of edible packaging is only going to grow and be more mainstream soon. So it's quite exciting.
It's very exciting. What if the actual packaging or like plates and straws and get more delicious than actual food? That's a competition.
I mean, honestly, the consumers that we have today snack on our straws. So they're like, we sometimes forget to use it as a straw. It's yum. So
the Friday fredagsmys, the Friday cozy with eatable straws.
Yeah, and we have it in Sweden's favorite flavors, chocolate and cinnamon,
Oh, then you were set for Christmas too. That's good.
Exactly.
We did get one more question. It was a combined question. So we covered your future plans, but also how big is your startup at the moment? Do you have several employees, or how does it work at the moment?
We have 5. So we have 3 full-time and 2 interns that work within the company, and the 3 of them that we have, they're in different places within the network. And it's, like I said, it's a run and operated by women, our manufacturing site. So that is what I'm extremely proud of, just to see how awesome the setup of it is. And of course, we hope to grow even more in the next coming years with more people.
Yeah, absolutely. We wish you the best of luck. Are you all alumni in your team, or are they?
No, we're not. We have one alumni in the team who is our R&D lead, but the rest of them are not alumni. But rather, we have them employed in India from there.
Yeah. Well, great and fantastic to hear about your journey so far, and we wish you the best of luck. We're looking forward to keeping track of where you're heading as well. I know that you're a little sleep deprived from traveling, so I'm gonna let you go. You're free to stick around if you want to, but otherwise we say thank you and have a great stay in LA as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Maria. Thanks for organizing this.
Yeah. We're moving on. We're gonna talk to next in line is Linda Carlson. My voice is disappearing. And maybe we talked about this before, Linda, but maybe we should just mention that you actually started your career here with us at Lund University as a student worker. You did, before we went to digitalize, to help us sort student documents and very important things like that. But that's not the story you're going to tell today. Maybe you mentioned it, but that's not why you're here today. You graduated from the bachelor's program in Equality and Diversity Management. I don't know what year it was. Was it 2014?
2014, I want to say.
Yeah.
Or 30. Yeah, one of those two. Yeah.
Somewhere there. And then rather immediately you moved down under to Australia. And you have started the Hive Collective. That's a platform for women who want to build connections and skills for their career. And that's something we're certainly looking forward to hearing more about, as well as your own journey.
Yeah.
So Linda, like I said to Divya, the screen is now yours.
Thank you, Maria. Thanks for that introduction. And yeah, it's funny actually when you think about how my career started sorting envelopes for international student placements, where that has taken me. I should put that into my CV.
Absolutely.
Well, I should. So yeah, thank you so much for inviting me, and thank you for giving me an opportunity to sort of share my very not so linear path to perhaps where I am today. As Maria sort of hinted, I'm from Sweden. I guess actually you can see it in my name, which is nice, and it's nice to have someone pronounce my name properly too. Thanks, Maria. I'm from a small town in Småland named Orrefors, and I sort of brought up in the middle of the forest, I guess you can say, and have always had an interest to sort of go abroad, and I always wanted to study in another country and really get that experience of what life would be like outside of Sweden. And when I was reflecting on like sharing my story today, I kind of saw that red thread, I guess, as we would say in Swedish, where there's a couple of things that keep reoccurring in my decisions of taking me to different places. And one thing that I did quite early on in high school was I went into an English run high school because I had this idea that I was going to go do university abroad. Reality caught up with me as I'm finishing high school, and I realized that actually it's really expensive to study abroad, and I need to drop this idea that I'm going to go and pay for a degree overseas when you can do that for free in Sweden and have high quality and really great education at home. So I went down south to Lund University. I was trying to figure out why Lund University, and I think this is a forbidden word, but I did consider whether I was going to go to Uppsala or Lund. And I'm really happy that I chose Lund and ended up down in Skåne. And yeah, so I actually had, I guess, like a gap year at university when I first came down to Lund, and I started off doing social anthropology because I was really interested in cultural studies. Again, this sort of idea that I want to go abroad and overseas and learn about other cultures and countries. And then I did some other courses at the same time, a few in gender, ethnology, and peace and conflict studies, that kind of space. And pretty much as soon as I hope you can hear me better now. Pretty much as soon as I was eligible to apply for an exchange, I did. And I moved, I applied for exchange to go to Australia, mostly because of the term application. I think that was the first term that was available because they do like everything the other way around on the other side of the world. And Australia, New Zealand, and I think the rest of Asia, or like the south of the equator, universities were available. And I want to do Indigenous studies. So Australia was an option, a given for me. And I was thinking about this. I remember when I got my letter and it said that I was going to go to University of Queensland. And I had this like realization that I had no idea where Queensland is. I thought it was a city. And I Googled University of Queensland, realized it's a state. So my next question then is, well, where is this university? Find out it's in Brisbane, which is not how you pronounce it. I very quickly learned it's Brisbane. And then I had to Google where Brisbane is. And that's basically how I ended up in Australia for the first time. Had absolutely no clue what I was about to get myself into. So I did my year exchange, and I think that was such a great experience, and I would highly recommend anyone who has the opportunity to go on an international exchange to do so. And you may want to put more research into where you're going, or you could just wing it and put your most exciting sounding universities in your top 5 and hope for the best. And you might end up at University of Queensland doing Indigenous studies, who knows? But anyways, that's where I was for a year. And at this point in time, I had started my degree in equality and diversity management as well. So it was a really interesting place to be in, doing First Nation studies here, anthropology and gender. But that year went really quickly, and I went back to Sweden and finished my degree. And by the time I was done at Lund University and had my piece of paper and my experience and my studies in my bag, I suppose, I decided to go back to Australia. So I had met my partner when I was on my exchange, and that's sort of what brought me back to Australia. And I was also really interested to see where my degree could take me. So moved to Brisbane and lived there for a little while. And it was a really great experience, like massive city, like mega city, millions of people, skyscrapers, tropical weather, and just a really cool place to be, so different from anything I had ever seen anywhere else. But very quickly, and this is, I think, one of the contributing factors for moving down to Tasmania, I realized that I cannot handle the heat. Like the tropical heat of North Australia is insane. Like you just walk around sweating all the time. And I didn't think I would ever miss snow, but I really did. And we're up in Brisbane and working on different projects there. And we basically have this discussion around, well, should we just try something different? And different became Tasmania. So if you Google the map of Australia and put Tasmania into it, we were talking about this just before joining the webinar today. It's very far away on the map, and down to Hobart is where the suitcases and our cat comes. So done a couple of moves, making it down here, and whilst in Hobart, which actually reminds me a lot about a Swedish town, weather-wise too, thank goodness, I realized that it's really lonely. There's not a lot of community groups, not a lot of places to go to meet people. The most common question in Tasmania I found is like people asking you what high school you went to. So if you don't have a history here, it's very hard to meet people. And that's sort of how this idea of the Hive Collective came about. So I met this other girl, her name is Annie, and we both have this experience of wanting to find a platform and a place where we can meet and connect with people, and a place where we can genuinely connect as well, not this kind of cold and sterile networking events where people are wearing suits and handing out business cards, and it's all really vain and impersonal. So Annie and I have this discussion about a community group where we connect, we meet, we collaborate, we learn from other women in the community, sharing their insights and skill sets, really building this sort of mentorship relationship between us and other more senior women and people who could take on the role as being role models for us as we pursue our careers. So this was a couple of years ago, and Annie and I have this first event, and I think like 86 people have booked in to come to our event, And we're in this really small venue and we have like so many people showing up, and all of a sudden Annie and I are like, oh my God, who are all these people? Realizing that it's actually not just us feeling this need for a community group run by women for women on our terms, meeting our needs. There's actually a whole community out there feeling the exact same things as we. So we realized that we have to keep going, basically. And the next year, Annie and I host a couple of events, so 4 events again, and the hive is just growing, and more people are showing up, and people are like asking, you know, what our plans are, what are we going to do, and what's the future of the hive, and so forth. And I was sitting down and like putting a little timeline down for how Hive kind of evolved over time, because we're all volunteers, so we all do this like outside of our work. And very quickly we realized that we needed to have a group of volunteers helping us on a regular basis, because otherwise we would basically burn out. So we become a not-for-profit and set up a board with board members and a bit of a structure around how we are going to run our events. Basically, that's kind of the story of how we start growing the community group. And since then, we've been hosting a number of different events covering, you know, all sorts of topics. We have surveys, so after each event, we ask everyone what they would like to hear about. And then those topics will be brought back as actual events at our Hive events that we're hosting. So we've had events in today, actually, for International Women's Day. We had a breakfast event covering the topic of public speaking. Had a great speaker sharing her skills around how to feel courageous as you share your knowledge, or rather contribute knowledge in a conversation and discussion. We've had topics around communication in the workplace, workshops. We do a lot of workshops, so workshops around transferable skills, so how to move between industries using the skill sets that you have, communication, effective communication, and then also try to focus on health and well-being. So we had a great doctor who's specializing on burnout come and talk to us about signs of burnout and making sure that you don't burn out at work or in life. Yeah, I was going to say I put down this little list of what we've been doing so far. So last year we had a bit of a discussion around where we want to take the Hive and what we would like to see moving forward. And in our surveys, our Hivers, as we like to call them, so people joining the Hive events, had requested bigger events, I suppose, and that's how the breakfast came about today, which is the first time we're hosting a breakfast, not just an evening event. And this year we'll be also hosting a conference for Hivers to come and have a number of different panels and discussions, workshops, and speakers talk about different topics. So one of the things that we do with the Hive is we've set up a set of 3 values, and those center around what we've heard from the community being connect, empower, and collaborate. And I think that says a lot about what the community is looking for from a community group like ours. And also thinking about it being International Women's Day today, where we often, it's a great opportunity to actually have these kind of discussions, where we look at the needs of different groups in our community and what we can do to support them. So for us, it's really important that we are a platform where people can connect and genuinely connect. I was mentioning the business cards and the suits and all that sort of stuff
Linda, I think your screen froze, if you can hear us. No, let's see. Yep, there we go. Okay, let's see if we get Linda. You're back?
Oh,
Let's
I'm
see.
sorry, I don't know what happened there. It just closed on me.
Yeah, you've been gone for just a few seconds, so we didn't miss
Too
very
much.
much.
Okay, oh, that's good. Yeah, well, I was just wrapping up anyways. Yeah, so the idea is that you can use the Hive as a platform to connect with people in a genuine way that's meaningful to you. And that was something that was really important for me. And I'm sure like a lot of the audience tonight, or well, today for you, if you're in Australia, in Sweden, coming to a place and not knowing anyone can be quite daunting. So finding that a way that works for you to meet people can be really important, and it's often really challenging if that environment isn't there. So for me, that's a real key for Hive, in terms of, I think what Divya was saying before, you know, she's not just creating products for the sake of creating products, she's trying to solve problems. And the same would be for the Hive, like we're here to solve that challenge of being able to meet people, even if you don't know anyone. And then we want to empower. So that goes for the people that come to our events, you want to feel you want to leave feeling empowered in a way, one way or another. So we always focus on skill sets or some kind of tangible takeaway. And then the last one is collaborate. So it's really important that it doesn't stop with you as an individual. We ask everyone to sort of reflect inwards and say, well, how can I give to the community and how can I collaborate with people around me? Because we all sit on skill sets, even though we like to think that we don't. Everyone comes to the room with knowledge, insights, and skills that will be of value to someone. So really consciously thinking about how you can give back to the community is a big thing. And for me, that like having the Hive has just been incredible. It's just really helped me sort of settle and find a place in this new place that I now call home. And I think anyone traveling or going to new places and moving places, and especially like international students coming to Lund or other going from Lund to other places would resonate with that. So that's sort of the story of the Hive, I think. I think I've covered most of what I wanted to share, but I'm not sure, there might be some questions or.
Thank you so much, Linda, for giving us more insight into creating this network. I have a question actually. I'm not too familiar with when it comes to gender equality, for example, in like Tasmania, but also in Australia as a whole. Have you met any challenges when creating the network that it's exclusively for women and women empowerment? Have there been any challenges so far?
Yeah, I wouldn't say challenges in that way. I think everyone's really supportive, and especially like from other women, lots of support and encouragement around it. But what I do find really interesting is there's been a number of occasions where we'll tell someone about the Hive, or you know, we've got this community group for women, and if it's a guy, he will say, "Oh, we need this, but for men. Can't you create one for men?" And you look at this person, you're like, well, actually, why don't you go off and create that for you and your male friends if that's what you need? So it's probably just that like sort of interesting dynamic that could come out of it at times, which I always laugh at, because yeah, there's so much to unpack there, but yeah, it's kind of funny.
Yeah, absolutely. Everyone needs inspiration and skills for their career for sure. How do you think because you studied the equality and diversity management, did you bring a lot of the knowledge from the program into working with the Hive?
Absolutely. Like I've always had an interest in gender, and like every work place that I've been in and work that I've done has always had an element of gender, diversity, inclusion. And I think what learning the theory and the concept and the research behind gender studies is invaluable, and I've used it, in work as much as it's part of the fire that sort of burns in me for wanting to do this kind of work in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We have
I love gender.
Sorry?
I love gender studies. I think everyone should study gender studies. It's such a great.
I agree. We have a question from the audience about how the Hive is organized. Is it a website, Facebook group, mouth to mouth? What does the organization look like?
Yeah, so got the website. I'll share it in the chat afterwards. But so yeah, it started off as just me and Annie, and we are a not-for-profit, so we generate income through ticket sales, and then that's used to run the event, so like catering and everything that comes with it. But we market, so like get the word out about the Hive through social media in particular, and then that's usually how people hear about us. And then there's word of mouth. And then today we made it into the news, which is like insane. So that probably will help getting the word out about the Hive as well. Yeah, it's very organic. I mean, I'd love to, actually, I wouldn't love to spend money on social media advertisement because I think that's a lot of waste of a marketing budget perhaps. But anyways, mostly organic, yeah.
Great. I just wrote the name in the chat. If you have a link, you're welcome to share that.
Yeah.
Linda.
Yeah, share that.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. It's lovely to see you as always. And if you want to stick around, you're welcome. And if you do, if you have any questions for Linda, you can just maybe write them in the Q&A for us.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. And we're moving ahead to Alan. And I'm just going to show. Hello.
Hey.
You are in Nigeria at the moment. It's great to see you.
Yes.
I'm just going to close down the technical stuff. It's popping up on my screen. There we go. Great to have you. What time zone are you in? What time is it there?
It's almost 11, so it's morning
okay.
still.
So we're in the same area.
Yeah.
Ella, you graduated from the master's degree program in disaster risk management and climate change adaptation, and one of the longest names, our degree programs in 2018. And I assume that's a joint program, so you took part of it at Lund University and other places as well, right?
No, it was completely Lund, yeah.
Completely Lund. Okay, sorry, I messed things up.
At the time, at least, maybe it's changed.
Since then, you have been working in many unmapped and quite unsecure places in the world that we're very interested in hearing about. And you've been working for the Red Cross for quite some time, and now you are working with the Danish Refugee Council. So I'm very interested in learning more about your story, and thank you so much for joining us today. So with that, I think I'm going to say that, Ella, the screen is yours.
Thank you so much. And thanks also to Linda and Divya for sharing their stories. I think it's really interesting for me to see how they're very entrepreneurial stories. And maybe contrary to that, mine is, I think, very much typical to the humanitarian kind of career path. But yeah, that's correct. I did the disaster risk management, DRM CTA program, we like to call it, program at LTH. And what's nice about the program, I mean, is that it had a very international outset. So although we did have, guest speakers here and there who would talk about the Swedish context, a lot of it was about the international framework for disaster risk management and organizations that work in this space. So we also had good links to, and even a lot of the faculty had maybe at some point worked for international organizations, the United Nations, the Red Cross movement. And that's how I actually came into contact with ICRC. There was a recruiter who had passed by. He made a presentation, but at the time I didn't really immediately think this is for me or anything. But what I can say is that that was one of the positive things about the program, is that it wasn't just the academic aspect of it, which was really fantastic, but also the aspect of networking. And I think that's something that, I think master's programs need to think about often, is how do they help you understand what's out there. Why climate adaptation and DRMCCA? It wasn't a program that I had on my mind for a long time, but I think for me, one question that I was always very interested in is, how do people make a living? I'm Sudanese. I grew up in a lot of developing countries. My father was an international civil servant, so I moved a lot around. And I think in every place I was always wondering, how do people make a living? And then when people, when you're talking about climate, when you're talking about conflict in very difficult places, I think a lot of the questions about how people make a living go back to, if you want to talk about conservation and environments, if you want to talk about human development, if you want to talk about conflict and peace, a lot of the questions go back to that. So that was within DRMCCA, my interest in, how do you make a living, and how do you manage the risks into your living, to your life, in very difficult places. So that I started with ICRC in Geneva. I started as kind of in a junior trainee role called an associate. I did a year, and then I was very lucky to have the opportunity to go on the field as a delegate. And I started out in the Sahel region in West Africa, which is a region that is unfortunately quite unstable. I started in Niger, where I am today visiting, and then in Mali, then I went to the Congo. And I was often based in little bases, kind of, that are quite far from the capital. And yeah, that's my path. Last year, I took the decision to maybe take a little break from the field and started working for the Danish Refugee Council in Dakar. So a regional role, and most of the time in these organizations, regional roles are kind of more advisory. You're there to support the country offices. You're working also on resource mobilization, and just technical development of programs. So that's where I am today. So maybe kind of to give this thing a little structure, that's my background. I kind of wanted to share maybe 4 or 5 lessons for people who are maybe interested in a humanitarian career or this kind of career. Knowing that I didn't set out for a humanitarian career, but maybe the questions that I was asking myself had led me to that. The first one is start as close to the ground as possible. So a lot of people, and I think a lot of people who do master's programs in Europe, etc., like in Lund, who are known to be academically rigorous, etc., they get the opportunity, the chance to start sometimes at regional, at Geneva level or Brussels level, etc. Like, if you want to work on development issues and humanitarian issues, start as close to the ground as possible. And sometimes that even means don't be at the national level. If you want to be in Mali, don't be in Bamako. Try to start as close to the ground as possible, because that gives you an idea of really what's going on, and then you can develop on that later. I think there's also, it's interesting to notice for me was working on the field is how much frustration there is about people who kind of started at the higher levels of the hierarchy and never really had that field experience because they're coming up sometimes with things that are not really well adapted to the field, to context, and to people's reality, not only to the reality of the communities we serve, but also to the realities of humanitarian workers. So maybe that's my, and knowing that starting in the field, it's sometimes also more natural to want to take a break and go somewhere where it's more calm. So that's my first thing. The second thing that I learned was that actually the hardest part is often personal. How you manage yourself, how you manage all the pressure that is around you, on you and around you, on everybody else. And it teaches you to be resilient. It teaches you to change a little bit, especially if you have a personality. So for example, for me, still have working on it, a personality where you want to do a really good job at any cost. You want things to turn out as you had imagined them, as you had designed them. There's also the pressure of you often working on the field for the ICRC and for many humanitarian organizations. You will be living with your colleagues who maybe there was tension in the workday and now you're bringing that tension back home. You don't have much of a personal life. You often have to, the more dangerous the place, the more pressure, the more need there is. There's security rules that bind your life. I mean, you can't maybe go for a walk. You can't go somewhere without saying where you're going to somebody. So that kind of thing. And it's all these little frustrations in life that you're constantly traveling. There's constant pressure. Things aren't turning out as you want them to be. Managing a team, which can sometimes be hard because there's all these cultural differences about how people perceive time and work and yes, and the organizations for which they work. So that was the second thing, is that you will change and it will teach you to be more resilient. And the hardest part could be managing yourself and not actually managing your work. Maybe the other third thing that I learned is that the people who are most in need, that most humanitarian organizations want to serve or want to reach, are very, very hard to reach. It's very few people, actually very few organizations actually can reach that last mile. A lot of people talk about the last mile, but for so many reasons, sometimes it's logistics, there's no roads, it's costly, it's dangerous. That last mile is very hard to get to. So that's another thing that I kind of I learned, and you have to be conscious about, and especially if you're designing programs that are really supposed to serve the people who are the most in need, is that they're very hard to reach. And sometimes it's also because the reach in terms of the access, not only physical access, but your access to them. You as an outsider, as someone coming from an international organization, you'll often be interacting with the more powerful people in the community. So that's the other thing. Maybe to wrap up, the fourth thing that was kind of interesting to me is that this International Women's Day was the inclusion of women in these kind of humanitarian spaces. What's very interesting is if you look at Dakar, if you look at Geneva, we often have gender parity. I think a lot of organizations, for many reasons, they have very good policies on how to integrate women and trying to keep them, but they work very well maybe when you're in Geneva, when you're in Dakar, when you're in these big cities. But when you're really working at the field level, it gets hard because the life cycle of being a woman, you know, people want to have kids, people want to have, there's many other aspects of life other than your work, which you're often not able to fulfill. So there's that. And then the second thing is also very interestingly is when you look at the aspect from the staff who are local staff who live there, resident staff or national staff, depending on how the organization refers to them, is it's very hard to recruit women. There's first a question of and really depending on the environment that you're in. But if I look at West Africa, there's factors that are related to them being competitive in the market in terms of maybe they haven't had equal opportunities in terms of education. And the second aspect is that they often don't want these jobs. They don't want to be exposed. There's also family ties. So they don't want to do the work. So it's been very interesting for me is, for example, often I've been in teams where all the local staff are men. And the more your job takes you to the field, the less that you will see men. So I think what's interesting is really working on this aspect of, for the local staff, the local humanitarian workers, how do we get more women on board, and how do we adapt the work if we want them to stay, and yeah. And then the last thing is maybe for people considering a career who are just, maybe finishing their master's or maybe even finishing their bachelor's. I just want to say the breaking in is the hardest part. I think a lot of people will tell you, I applied to so many and I didn't get anything. And the breaking in is the hardest part. And a lot of it is sometimes chance, being just at the right, having submitted the right application at the right time, you're the profile they're looking for. A lot of these organizations also, in terms of profiles, they're not just looking at experience. They're looking at maybe where, I had talked about the personal aspect is quite difficult. So they look at the profiles and think about what, how much maturity does this person have? Can there, for the ICRC, for example, and other organizations, they also look at the profile in terms of where does this person come from? Can this pose a problem in this context? For example, neighboring countries can sometimes, even within Africa, have dynamics that are conflictual, where they're participating maybe in the conflict somewhere or another that organizations think about. So the breaking in is the hardest part. And once you're in, I think the most important thing is to think about what makes you happy, what works for you. For me, moving on from the Red Cross, which was an organization that gave me a lot of opportunities, was also, sometimes it's not a difficult decision, but you have to think about what makes me happy, and am I burning out? Am I tired? What do I want to do in terms of intellectual development, professional development? Do I want to do something else? So once you're in, don't be afraid to move around and to look for the thing that makes you happy. So to know yourself as well. So that's my maybe 4 or 5 tips since I've left Lund. And yeah, over to you, Maria, and or if there's any questions.
Thank you so much, Ala. It's very interesting to hear about your part of the world at the moment. Let's see. Jump interview. Here we go. So I have a question for you. You mentioned managing yourself can be one of the big challenges. I can imagine being out in rather unsecure conflict areas, and you see many things that can be troubling for your own mind, of course. Where do you get the energy back to continue?
That's a very good question. And I think for me, that was the question, is that choosing, okay, I need to take a break from this, working on the field was exactly that, is where do you get the energy? And I don't have the energy anymore, so I need a break. So maybe to go to roles where you're maybe not in contact with that so much. And yeah, I think there's a certain, resilience in knowing that not to absorb everything from your surroundings, to be a little more, I even want to say passive, I think at the beginning I always had this urge always to react to everything. You want to react, you want to do, you want to respond, but sometimes you just need to understand that what you can change, what you cannot change, and yeah, there's no easy answers. I think a lot of these organizations who are very operational on the field try to give people the opportunity to take unpaid leaves or other types of leave in between missions. So that helps. But for me, it's also the decision of sometimes going to another organization where you can maybe be in a position where you're less more removed from the action, I could say. But I have to say that sometimes I struggle being in Dakar. You almost feel guilt or that you're not really, humanitarian work shouldn't be really in the office, you know, you should be interacting with people more. So yeah, no easy answers to that.
Yeah, that was actually my next question. I've read stories from other people who's been in the field, like Doctors Without Borders, for example, that they really the hardest part is actually to get back to their normal everyday routine in the office or going back to their home country. Is that something you experienced too?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely. You feel you feel a little bit of guilt that you're not really doing something. And in your role also as regional, sometimes you have to assure the quality and work on really the technical aspects of things. So when you give, for me, sometimes I give feedback. I have to give feedback. That's my job sometimes to offices on what they're doing. But I can just imagine like the conditions under which they had to do this work. And who am I to tell them to, no, do it better. This isn't technically right, you know? So there's definitely that as well. Yeah.
We have another question from the audience. Christina says, thank you for an interesting talk. Could you please describe a working day for you now? What does it look like?
Yeah, the working day for me now is completely like the working day for somebody who would probably be working anywhere in Sweden, even in a bank. You know, I wake up in the morning and it's emails, it's meetings. A lot of it is there's three things. You're either receiving things from the field for feedback, you're having meetings with regional teams, and then once in a while you move. So for example, now I'm in Niamey. The country's reviewing their strategy, what they want to do in the next year. So then I would come to the country, and usually when I'm in the country, even if I visit field offices to see what they're doing, I'm most of the time in the capital. Before my life looks quite different in that we would have long periods where we could be on the field. At least once a month, you would have to go on activities in there. Depending on where you were, for example, in the Congo, you're really in very remote places. You're outside the network. So all day long, you wake up in the morning, you do a radio call just to say, okay, we're good. And you start the work, and you're with the communities, working with them directly. Halfway through the day, you eat and you sleep. So it's really very different depending on the mission. Yeah, a lot of driving around. We in the Congo, even in Mali, we spend a lot of time driving around. The distances are huge. A lot of these countries that are in conflict, and maybe that's part of the problem in Africa, is that they're huge and populations are very remote. Infrastructure is quite bad and not very connected to the world. Yeah.
And have you ever thought, there's another question here, have you ever thought about, because of maybe the stress of being out in the field and the challenges that include, have you ever considering changing a career because of stress?
Yeah, I do actually. I do, and it's always interesting to see the number of people who have started and kind of not continued in this career. But I think for me the logic is more, you can go, you can come back, it's more, you know, not your linear moving in one path, but maybe going and coming back once you're rested. That's what I tell myself. But I do think about that. I hope that my next I mean at the end of this contract, I decided I just want to take some time off. Mm-hmm. And think about where I want to go. I also want to do work that is more related to climate, to development. The other struggle with the humanitarian sector in a lot of this work is that places are so unstable and things are so unstable that you do things and a year later it's going to be gone, or you're going to have to redo the same thing. And yeah, so absolutely, I do. That's true.
Yeah. Have you found this question, how do people make a living? This question is close to your heart. Have you found a response to that with the experience you have now today?
I think there is never going to be one answer. It really depends on where you are. It really depends on what you are. What I've learned is people have very innovative ways to make a living. Yeah, no, there's no definitive answer.
continue the hunt, maybe.
Continue
Or
the
very
hunt,
different, probably, where you come in the world.
Yeah.
And what's your plan next year? You're in the Danish Refugee Council now, and maybe what's your plan for the upcoming 5 years, maybe?
I really don't know. I know my plan for the next few months is, once I finish this contract, is to go to Uganda, take a break there. Uganda is somewhere that I don't have that many links to, but it's just a place that I felt good in, and take a few months off. And then after that, I would like to work in something more, the climate adaptation part of it, because everything that I've been doing so far is very much working on household level economic recovery, but just the bigger picture of climate, which really affects this part of the world a lot, and there's a lot to be done about it. So yes, and maybe using a more innovative approach like Linda or Divya, yeah, where you're not necessarily working for someone, but doing your own thing. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, we wish you the best of luck with whatever you choose to do, and thank you so much, Ella, for giving your advice and sharing your wisdom. I was checking if we have more questions for our panels. No, we don't at the moment. So thank you so much, everyone who's been watching, and our speakers. I hope you had a very inspiring start of the day or end of the day or in the middle of the night, depending on where you're located. As I mentioned, we will send a link to the recording, so you will be able to watch it again. I think you can find the links to Ooble. I'll share them before we go as well, so we can have you can look at the stores, for example. Here we go. weareooble.com is available in the chat. Also, Linda shared a link to the Hive Collective if you want to have a look at that. And of course, I forgot to write down our link to our website to learn more about the Alumni Network. So maybe in the future, we'll see some of you speakers at our events, and you're always welcome to join the network whenever you want to. So with that, I say have a good day to everyone. Please feel free to send us questions or anything if you have questions about the Alumni Network, and have a good International Women's Day as well. So thank you so much for watching. See you next time. Bye-bye.